Las Vegas, 2006. A blackjack table inside one of the great hotels on the Strip, somewhere between midnight and 3 in the morning. In that specific stretch of hours when the casual tourists have retreated to their rooms and the people left at the tables are the ones who are there because they cannot leave. At this particular table, a man who is recognizable to virtually every person in the building is sitting with a stack of chips that represents more money than most of those people will earn in a decade. He is large, not just in the way that former professional athletes are large, but in the way that fills a room, that shifts the gravitational center of any space he occupies. He is talking. He is always talking. He is funny and loud and apparently perfectly at ease. And anyone watching him from across the floor would assume that a man so relaxed, so clearly in his element, could not possibly be losing. He has lost $400,000 tonight. He will come back tomorrow night. His name is Charles Barkley. He is one of the greatest power forwards in the history of the National Basketball Association. He is a member of the Basketball Hall of Fame. He is one of the most recognizable sports figures in America, a man whose television career after basketball made him, if anything, more famous than he had been as a player. He has made, across 30-plus years of basketball and broadcasting, enough money to never worry about anything for the rest of his life. He has also, by his own public accounting, lost $30 million gambling. $30 million. Not estimated by journalists, not alleged by creditors, not reconstructed from legal documents, stated openly by the man himself, in interviews and in print, with a candor so complete and so unembarrassed that it forced the world to reckon with something more complicated than a simple story of excess. Charles Barkley did not try to hide his gambling. He talked about it. He explained it. He analyzed it with the same blunt intelligence he applied to basketball. And in doing so, he created something rarer than a cautionary tale. He created an honest account of what addiction looks like inside a successful life. Not instead of success, not after success, but alongside it, threaded through it, nourished by it. This is the story of Charles Barkley, the man they called Sir Charles, the round mound of rebound, the player who never won a championship and spent 30 years making sure you knew he did not care. A man who grew up with nothing, earned everything, and handed $30 million of it across casino tables with a smile on his face and a joke on his lips and a need underneath all of it that the jokes could not quite cover. It begins in the way that most stories about this particular kind of American achievement begin, in a place very far from Las Vegas. Leeds, Alabama, 1963. Charles Wade Barkley was born on February 20th, the first child of Charcy Glenn and Frank Barkley. The marriage did not hold. Frank Barkley left when Charles was young, not dramatically, not violently, but with the quiet finality of a man who had decided that fatherhood was not his vocation. Charles was raised primarily by his mother and, in the texture of daily life, by his maternal grandmother, Johnnie Mae Edwards, a woman of strong opinions and absolute expectations, who seems to have been the central stabilizing force of his early years. Leeds was not a prosperous place. It was a small city outside Birmingham, working class in the specific Southern way that means church on Sunday and work the rest of the week, and not much conversation about what you do not have. The Barkley family had limited means. His mother worked multiple jobs to keep things moving. Charles understood from a young age that money was something you chased rather than something you held. He was not, initially, the obvious candidate for basketball greatness. He was short for a future professional player. He grew later in his mid-teens and arrived at high school still undersized for the position he would eventually dominate. He was not heavily recruited out of Leeds High School. He received one Division I scholarship offer. One. He took it. He went to Auburn University. And somewhere in those college years, between an undersized freshman and a 6'4", 250-pound force of nature, something happened that coaches at the professional level recognized immediately. It was not just athleticism. The league was full of athletes. It was something harder to name, a combination of leverage and timing and competitive will that meant Charles Barkley could do things near the basket that players 3 inches taller and 30 pounds heavier could not replicate. He was, in the specific vocabulary of basketball people, a freak, meant entirely as a compliment. The Philadelphia 76ers selected him 5th overall in the 1984 NBA draft. He was 21 years old. He arrived in Philadelphia with a personality that was already fully formed. Outspoken, funny, combative, allergic to conventional wisdom, constitutionally unable to say the diplomatic thing when the honest thing was available. He made friends instantly. He made enemies almost as fast. The city of Philadelphia, which has a specific appetite for athletes who do not soften their edges, largely loved him. He played 8 seasons with the 76ers, developing into one of the most dominant power forwards the league had seen. He averaged more than 22 points and nearly 12 rebounds per game across that span, numbers that, for someone at his listed height and at his position, existed at the outer edge of what the sport had previously understood to be possible. He was selected to the All-Star game repeatedly. He was, by the early 1990s, one of the 10 best basketball players on earth, and knew it with a confidence that he shared publicly and at length. The money came with the stardom. His contracts grew. The endorsements arrived. Most famously, a long relationship with Nike that made him a global presence in their advertising. The salary, the endorsements, the appearance fees, the ancillary income from a personality that translated everywhere. Charles Barkley was earning at the level that only the very top tier of American professional sport produces. He was also, from early in his career, gambling. Not secretly, not shamefully. Gambling was part of how Charles Barkley moved through the world of professional basketball, part of the culture of the league during those years, particularly among a certain tier of players for whom the salary had made most conventional excitement inaccessible. The games were big. The stakes were real. The card games on team flights, the casino trips during road trips to cities where the hotels were within walking distance of gaming floors. These were not unusual activities in the NBA of the 1980s and 90s. For most players, they were recreational. For Charles Barkley, they were something more. The distinction, he later explained in terms that were disarmingly precise, was not about the money itself. He was rich enough that losing a few $1,000s was not a financial event. The distinction was about the sensation, the need, the way that sitting at a blackjack table at 1 in the morning with something real at stake activated a part of his brain that ordinary life, even the ordinary life of a celebrity multimillionaire, could not reach. He traded to the Phoenix Suns before the 1992-93 season. Phoenix was, in several ways, a new beginning. He was 30 years old. He was playing with a young and talented team that he recognized, immediately, as a championship contender. And in the season that followed, he was transcendent, averaging 25 points and 12 rebounds, leading the Suns to the NBA Finals, and winning the league's Most Valuable Player award. He became, in the spring of 1993, arguably the most discussed player in basketball. The Suns lost the finals to the Chicago Bulls in 6 games. Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen were waiting at the summit, as they were for everyone in that era, and the summit remained out of reach. Charles Barkley would never win an NBA championship. He played 3 more seasons in Phoenix, then 2 seasons in Houston with the Rockets, then retired in 2000 after a stroke suffered during a preseason game that served as the body's definitive announcement that the career was over. He was 36 years old. He had played 16 seasons. He had earned, across salary and endorsements and business arrangements, enough money to be financially secure for the rest of his life, and then for his children's lives, and then for his grandchildren's lives. There was no practical need, ever again, for Charles Barkley to worry about money. And then came the silence. This is the part of the story that requires attention because it is the part that explains what $30 million actually means in the context of a life. The silence of retirement, for an athlete of Barkley's type, intensely competitive, constitutionally restless, wired by decades of professional sport into a state of permanent heightened consequence. This silence is not peace. It is a condition. It is the absence of the thing that gave every day its meaning and its structure and its stakes. The crowd is gone. The opponents are gone. The game, with its daily urgency and its immediate feedback, is gone. Charles Barkley joined the broadcasting world relatively quickly. First, with Turner Network Television's coverage of the NBA, eventually settling into the desk of Inside the NBA, alongside Ernie Johnson, Kenny Smith, and Shaquille O'Neal, in an arrangement that would become, across the subsequent decades, the most watched and most discussed studio show in the history of American sports television. He was brilliant at it. Funny, provocative, honest, frequently wrong in ways that were more interesting than most analysts being right, immune to the peer pressure that makes most sports television boring. The job was good. The job was, genuinely, fulfilling in ways that broadcasting rarely is. But the job was not the game. The job could not replicate what the game had provided, that particular quality of consequence, of irreversibility, of mattering in real time. Broadcasting is performed with a safety net. The game is not. The casino had no safety net. The gambling escalated as the playing career wound down and ended. Las Vegas became a regular destination, not just a city he passed through, but a place he sought out, a place that understood what he needed from it and was organized, efficiently and completely, to provide exactly that. The hotels knew him, the pit bosses knew him, the credit lines were extended, the tables were available at whatever hour he arrived. He played blackjack primarily. He understood the game, not just its mechanics, which any hour of study can teach, but its rhythm, its particular quality of sustained consequence, the way it held his attention across hours, in a way that few things outside of basketball ever had. He was not a superstitious gambler, not a ritualistic one. He was a man who wanted to be somewhere that mattered, and at a blackjack table with serious money on the line, everything mattered. The losses were substantial from early on. Not devastating in a single night, though there were nights that approached devastating, but consistent, accumulating, a regular outflow that was large enough to matter even at the level of his income. He later said that he lost $2.5 million in one weekend in Las Vegas. He lost $400,000 in a single night on multiple occasions. He had a credit line at the Wynn Las Vegas that eventually led to legal action. In 2008, the Wynn Las Vegas filed a lawsuit against Charles Barkley for $400,000 in unpaid gambling debts, markers he had signed and not settled. The lawsuit was public. It was covered in newspapers and on sports television and on the early sports internet. It put a specific number, a specific creditor, and a specific legal mechanism into the story of his gambling in a way that could not be dismissed or reframed. He settled the matter, he paid, but the lawsuit had done something that even his own public admissions had not quite managed. It had made the gambling real to an audience that might otherwise have processed his self-disclosures as entertaining storytelling rather than documentation of a genuine problem. He was not defensive about it. This is the quality about Charles Barkley that makes his story different from almost any other athlete gambling story. He was not caught. He was not exposed. He chose to be public. He sat in front of television cameras and described his gambling with a specificity and a self-awareness that was, by the standards of celebrity self-disclosure, genuinely unusual. He said he had a problem. He said the problem was his. He did not blame the casinos. He did not blame his upbringing or his career or the culture of the league. He said, in essence, I have spent $30 million on something that I know is irrational, and I did it because I wanted to. And the wanting is something I am still working on. He estimated the total losses in a book. The number that circulated most widely was $30 million, given in different forms and different contexts across multiple years of interviews. In one television appearance, he said the number out loud with the matter-of-fact tone of a man reading a grocery list, and the host across from him visibly struggled to formulate a follow-up question because the number and the tone were so dissonant. $30 million, said the way other people say, I had a difficult year. There is a clinical dimension to what Barkley described that the entertainment framing of his disclosure sometimes obscured. The escalation of stakes over time, needing bigger bets to achieve the same sensation. The inability to leave one down, the conviction that the reversal was always the next hand. The prioritization of casino time over other obligations, relationships, commitments. The compartmentalization, the ability to walk away from a table having lost $500,000, appear on national television 12 hours later, and perform with complete professional fluency, as if the two versions of the evening occupied separate universes. He described all of this, and in describing it, he gave a portrait of addiction that did not look like the standard cultural image. The disheveled man at the slots, the desperate figure at the ATM at 3 in the morning. He gave a portrait of addiction that existed inside a successful, high-functioning, publicly admired life. That portrait is, in some ways, more unsettling than the conventional image, because it cannot be dismissed as someone else's problem. It looks, from the outside, like a person doing fine. The Wynn lawsuit was the lowest public point. There was a period in the middle 2000s, as his gambling was becoming regular newspaper copy, when the question of whether Charles Barkley's post-basketball life was going to be defined by this was genuinely open. He was still on television, he was still beloved, but the accumulating weight of the losses, the number climbing, the lawsuits, the candid interviews adding up, created a narrative that could have consumed him. It did not. In part, this was because of his broadcasting career, which gave him purpose and structure and a public identity that was not organized around the gambling. In part, it was because he began slowly, inconsistently, without the dramatic intervention of a formal treatment program, to manage the behavior differently. The casino trips became less frequent. The stakes by his own account came down. He did not stop gambling entirely, and he has never claimed to have done so. But the hemorrhage, if not fully stanched, was slowed. In interviews across the last decade, he has been measured about where things stand. He says the gambling is less of a problem than it was. He says he still goes to Las Vegas. He does not claim recovery in the language of a program because he has not been through a formal program. He claims something more modest and more honest, that he got older and the appetite changed, and that the $30 million is a number he has accepted as the cost of that appetite across the years it ran at full intensity. He has talked sometimes about what he thinks the gambling was actually about. He is thoughtful on this. Surprisingly so, given that his public persona is built substantially on the performance of non-thoughtfulness. He has said that basketball for 30 years was the organizing principle of his life, the thing that told him where to be, what to do, how to measure himself. When it ended, something was missing. The casino, he has suggested, was filling a structural hole, not just providing entertainment. It was providing consequence, daily, immediate, unambiguous consequence, of a kind that ordinary life withholds. He has never won a championship. He knows this. Everyone knows this. It is perhaps the central unresolved fact of his basketball legacy, the thing that the MVP award and the Hall of Fame induction and the 11 All-Star appearances do not fully close. He has said, many times, that he does not lose sleep over it, that the championship was denied him by Jordan and by circumstance, and that his career stands on its own. Whether that is entirely true, or whether there is something in the sustained appetite for risk that speaks to an unresolved hunger for the highest possible stakes, is a question only he can answer. He is in his early 60s now. He is still on television. Inside the NBA remains the most watched studio show in the sport, and Charles Barkley remains its central force. Opinionated, irreverent, frequently wrong, always compelling. He announced in 2022 that he planned to retire from television after the network's deal with the NBA expired, drawing a line under a broadcasting career that has lasted longer than his playing career and reached more people. The $30 million is gone. He has not recovered it, has not tried to recover it, has not expressed any serious wish that he could. He has described it, in his most reflective moments, as what he paid for something. Not for the gambling itself, but for the years of intensity, of consequence, of feeling fully alive, in the specific way that only very high stakes can produce for a person wired the way he is wired. Whether $30 million is a reasonable price for that is not a question he is asking. He has made his peace with the number the way you make peace with any large and irreversible fact, by deciding that fighting it is less productive than understanding it. There is something in Charles Barkley's story that sits differently from the other great gambling stories, the ones that end in bankruptcy courts, in prison cells, in unsolved murders in Japanese estates. His story ends, at least so far, in a studio chair, under television lights, laughing, talking, alive and comfortable and professionally successful in a way that the $30 million spread across the casino floors of Las Vegas over 20 years did not finally prevent. He beat the game on the scoreboard that matters most to him, even if the casino won the one on the felt. The chips that went across those tables, $2.5 million in a weekend, $400,000 in a night, 30 million across the full span of the years, they are gone. They do not accumulate interest. They do not generate returns. They are the truest kind of spent money there is. And Charles Barkley, who grew up in Leeds, Alabama with nothing, and earned everything, and gave 30 million of it back to Las Vegas, is sitting on television telling you exactly what he did with it. That, in the end, is the most Charles Barkley thing he has ever done.